Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime History Relaxing. Tonight we step softly into a medieval town before sunrise when the roofs are still black against the sky, the church bell has not yet called the first honest people from bed, and the alley stones shine with dampness. You stand there with a sack over your shoulder, a trap in one hand, and the delicate knowledge that your working day begins where everyone else's good manners end. Somewhere nearby, something tiny scratches behind a wall. Lovely. You probably won't survive this, at least not with your dignity fully polished. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, tell us where you are listening from and what your local time is. Maybe it is midnight in Manila, early evening in Manchester, or some quiet hour in a room where the rest of the house has gone still. Now dim the lights and let yourself become the person nobody wants to invite in, yet everyone eventually needs. You are a rat catcher, moving through a town that smells of smoke-wet timber, sour ale, old straw, and the very confident perfume of open drains. The air is cool but not clean. Medieval people know the difference. They may not understand bacteria as a modern scientist would, but they understand stench. They understand spoiled grain, feverish children, bitten fingers, and the little dark shapes that dart along the base of walls. The town around you is not silent, it only pretends to be. A horse shifts in a stable iron shoes, scraping stone. A sleepy apprentice coughs behind a shutter. Water drips from a roof edge into a barrel below. Then under all of it comes the thin, restless music of rats. A rustle in straw, a patter under boards, a squeak that stops the moment you turn your head. You know this sound well, it is your morning bell. Most medieval towns are crowded places pressed within walls or clustered around a market, a bridge, a castle or a cathedral. People live close together and they bring everything with them. Pigs, chickens, dogs, cats, carts, hides, bones, barrels, ashes, fish guts, rushes from floors and the constant leftovers of daily life. In many towns, household waste is thrown into lanes or piled in middens, those cheerful heaps of refuse where the past gathers in layers. If a modern visitor arrived here with polished shoes and optimism, both would be ruined by breakfast. You move carefully because the street is not simply a street. It is a path, a drain, a dumping ground, a workplace, and occasionally a small river of something best not inspected too closely. The stones are slick under your boots. Your toes have learned where to land. You step around a puddle that glimmers in the lantern light and tell yourself it is mostly rainwater. This is the sort of lie that keeps a person moving. The mainstream fact of your world is simple and unpleasant. Medieval towns often struggled with waste disposal. City authorities did pass rules about cleaning streets, removing dung, and keeping certain trades away from public places. But rules and reality are old enemies. A tanner, a butcher, or a household servant may know perfectly well where refuse is supposed to go, yet the nearest ditch is so convenient and dawn is so early, and honestly, who is watching? Well, you are watching, not because you are noble, because rats follow the evidence. The first place you check is near a bakehouse where warmth leaks from the walls even before the ovens are fully awake. Flour dust clings to cracks. A dropped crust lies near the threshold, already nibbled into a crescent. You crouch, your knees complain. A rat has passed here recently, leaving small prints in pale powder neat as tiny writing. You set one trap near the wall, tucked where a careless boot will not crush it. Then you wait a breath. Nothing. Of course nothing. Rats are not fools. That is one of their most annoying qualities. A sleepy baker opens the door, face red from heat eyes narrowed at you, as if you personally invented vermin. He mutters that he heard them in the rafters. You nod with the calm patience of a person who has heard every version of this complaint. They are always in the rafters, or the cellar, or behind the saint's picture, or under the baby's cradle, which makes everyone suddenly religious. He asked whether you can clear them all. You say you can reduce the trouble. That is not the same thing, and both of you know it. Medieval rat catching is not always a formal profession in every place and period. Sometimes it is part of a wider bundle of unpleasant jobs done by people who trap animals, clear pests, remove dead creatures, or take on dirty tasks for small payments. Historians still argue whether rat catchers in many medieval towns were recognised specialists or more often casual workers who stepped into the role when hunger and opportunity met in the same alley. Either way, in this morning's life, the distinction does not warm your hands. You continue down the lane, passing timber houses that lean toward one another like gossips sharing secrets. Upper floors jut over the street, narrowing the strip of sky above. The walls are wattle and daub wood and clay patched and repatched. Gaps open where rats can enter, nest escape, and return with relatives. Always relatives. Rats are deeply committed to family growth, which is rude but effective. You pause by a doorway and listen. Inside, someone snores. Beneath the snore comes a faint ticking noise. Claws on wood. You picture them behind the wall, warm in a nest of straw cloth scraps and stolen threads. Not monsters, just animals. Hungry, clever, quick, and wonderfully suited to a human mess. That is the uncomfortable truth. You're not really fighting rats alone. You're fighting the town's habits. Every spilled grain, every uncovered bin, every refuse heap, every damp cellar, every warm stable says welcome. The rats do not need an invitation written in ink. They read the city and smell. And what a smell it is! Smoke from hearths hangs low in the air. Old fish lingers near yesterday's market stalls. Urine sharpens the corners of walls. Hay rots sweetly behind a stable. Somewhere a privy pit breathes upward in the cold. You wrap part of your cloak closer to your face, not because it helps very much, but because humans enjoy gestures of hope. A quirky tidbit drifts into your memory. Some medieval and early modern pest workers were believed to use charm songs or special words to lure or drive away vermin. Whether such tricks truly belong to every rat catcher is doubtful, but people liked the idea that rats might obey secret knowledge. It is comforting, isn't it? Better to imagine a whisper that commands them than admit they are simply dining well in the pantry. Still, you carry a little charm in your pouch. Not because you're superstitious, you tell yourself, just because your grandmother gave it to you, and refusing a grandmother's charm feels more dangerous than any rat. The sky lightens slowly. Grey becomes pearl behind the roof lines. The first bell rings deep and slow, rolling through the town like a hand over a sleeping blanket. Doors open, buckets appear. A woman tosses old rushes from her floor, and they scatter into the lane with crumbs and fleas hidden inside. A boy runs past barefoot somehow, avoiding every horror beneath him. A dog sniffs your sack with professional interest. You are already tired, though the day has hardly begun. Your back knows the weight of bending. Your hands know scratches, splinters, and bites that throb in damp weather. Your clothes carry the smell of places where respectable people do not linger. And yet, as the town wakes around you, there is a strange importance to your work. No one celebrates the person who enters the foul corners. No poet praises the one who checks beneath the grain chest. But the baker wants his flour safe. The mother wants the scratching gone from the cradle wall. The merchant wants his stores protected. The monks want silence in the pantry. The whole city, proud and prayerful and muddy, depends on small unseen labours. So you lift your trap, adjust your sack, and follow the next sound. There it is again behind the butcher's lane. A quick scrape, a pause, a soft rush through straw. The town has opened its eyes, and so have the rats. You turn toward the butcher's lane, where the day's work promises to be louder, messier, and far more fragrant than any polite corner of town. The air thickens before you even arrive, as if it has been chewing on scraps all night and is not ready to swallow. Your boots stick slightly with each step. That is never a good sign, yet it is exactly where your trade thrives. Before you begin, you take stock of what you carry. Tools are everything in a life like yours. Not elegant tools, not finely polished instruments, but practical companions that smell faintly of old work and stubborn effort. In your sack, you have a handful of wooden traps, simple in design, but effective when placed well. A narrow cage sits at the bottom, patched with wire, and bent slightly from previous struggles. You also carry a thick cloth bag tied with a cord used for collecting what you catch, though you try not to think too deeply about its contents once it is full. At your belt hangs a small knife, not for heroics, just for cutting cords, prying boards, or dealing with the unexpected. And there is always something unexpected. You reach down and run your fingers along the handle of a stick smooth from use. It serves as a probe, a lever, and occasionally a barrier between your skin and something that would prefer to bite it. You have learned slowly and painfully that distance is your friend. Then there are your less obvious tools. A bit of bait wrapped in cloth, usually scraps of meat or stale bread. Sometimes cheese, though, that is more of a story than a rule. Rats will eat many things, and often they prefer whatever humans least want them to have. A small pouch at your side holds a few dried herbs. Whether they truly repel vermin or simply make you feel better is a question you avoid answering too firmly. A mainstream historical detail slips quietly into your thoughts. Trapping devices in medieval Europe were often simple mechanical contraptions made from wood, metal, or a combination of both. They relied on tension, weight, and clever placement rather than complicated engineering. No springs with perfect precision, no mass-produced parts. Just basic physics, patience, and a fair bit of luck. You kneel near a pile of discarded bones, stripped, mostly clean, but still fragrant enough to draw attention. The ground here is soft with old straw and bits of waste. Perfect. You press one trap into place, steadying it with care. Your hands move slowly, almost gently, as if you are setting a small stage for a performance you will not watch. A sound comes from behind you, a low snuffling. You turn to see your dog. Well, not exactly your dog. More like a companion of convenience. A wiry creature with sharp eyes and a tail that never quite settles. He has followed you often enough that you no longer question it. In fact, you rely on him more than you admit. His nose is far better than yours, and his enthusiasm borders on reckless. Dogs like this have long been used in pest control, though nobody writes songs about them. They dart, dig corner, and bark at the hidden world beneath boards and behind walls. Some rat catchers also use ferrets, slipping them into burrows to flush out prey. It is a clever method, though it requires a certain tolerance for chaos. The dog sniffs the air, then darts toward a stack of crates. You follow more slowly, lifting your stick to nudge one crate aside. The smell intensifies. Underneath, a dark gap opens, and from it comes the unmistakable flicker of movement. There. You feel a familiar tightening in your chest. Not fear exactly, but awareness. A rat is small, yes, but it is quick, and it does not hesitate. You position the trap near the opening, adjusting the bait with care. The dog waits, muscles tense as if the entire world depends on what happens next. For a moment, nothing moves. Then a whiskered nose appears, testing the air. The rat's body follows cautious, its eyes catching the thin morning light. It pauses, sensing something unfamiliar. You hold your breath. Even the dog seems to understand the importance of stillness. A twitch, a step. The trap snaps. The sound is sharp, final. The dog leaps forward, barking in triumph while you move quickly to secure the catch. It is not a pleasant task, but it is necessary. You work with practiced efficiency, avoiding unnecessary contact, tying the cord, placing the result into your sack. One down, many more to go. As you stand, stretching your back, you notice a man watching from the doorway of a nearby shop. He nods once, a gesture that carries both gratitude and a hint of relief. Rat catchers are rarely greeted with open arms, but moments like this remind you that your work has value even if it is not spoken aloud. Still, your reputation is a curious thing. Some people treat you as a necessary nuisance, someone who brings dirt and trouble along with solutions. Others see you as a kind of guardian standing between them and a problem they do not fully understand. It is an uneasy balance. There is also a more peculiar belief that lingers in certain corners of society. Some think that rat catchers possess unusual knowledge, perhaps even a touch of something mystical. It is said that you know the hidden paths of creatures, that you understand the language of scratching walls and shifting straw. A strange idea, but one that occasionally works in your favour. Historians still debate whether such beliefs had any real influence on how rat catchers were treated, or if they were simply stories told to make sense of a difficult job. Either way, you have learned not to dismiss them entirely. In a world where illness and misfortune often arrive without warning, people cling to explanations, even unusual ones. You move on, following the dog as he leads you deeper into the lane. The sun is beginning to rise now, casting a pale glow over the rooftops. Shadows shrink and the town becomes more visible, though not necessarily more pleasant. At the far end of the lane you find another promising spot. A broken barrel, its contents long gone, sits near a drain that trickles with murky water. You crouch again, setting another trap, your movement steady and deliberate. This is your rhythm. Search, listen, place, wait. The work is repetitive but never dull. Each corner holds a new challenge, each sound a new possibility. You learn to read the environment, to notice the smallest signs. A disturbed patch of straw, a faint trail along a wall, a hole just large enough to invite trouble. And always there is the sense that you are part of something larger. Not just a town, but a constant struggle between order and disorder, between what people build and what slips through the cracks. The dog barks again, drawing your attention to a nearby doorway. You follow, ready to begin the cycle once more. The day stretches ahead of you, full of narrow spaces, quick movements, and the quiet satisfaction of a job that few would choose but many depend upon. You adjust your grip on the trap, take a slow breath, and step forward. You leave the butcher's lane behind, though. Its smell clings to you like an unwelcome memory, and you begin to follow something far less visible but just as reliable. Your nose, not in any refined sense, not like a perfumer selecting notes for a noble court, but in the blunt, practical way that guides your steps toward places where rot, damp, and neglect gather. If there is one skill that defines your trade, it is this quiet tracking of scent. The town unfolds before you as a map of odours. Some are sharp and immediate, like fresh dung or spilled ale. Others are deeper layered over days and weeks, soaking into wood and earth. These are the ones you seek. Rats prefer consistency. A place that smells bad today but was clean yesterday is less appealing than a place that has been reliably unpleasant for a long time. You turn into a narrow passage between two houses. The space is barely wide enough for your shoulders. The walls lean inward, trapping the air. It is warmer here, though the sun has not yet reached it. Warmth means life, and life in your experience often includes rats. The ground beneath your feet is soft, a mix of old straw ash, and something you choose not to identify too closely. Your boots sink slightly and you feel the subtle give of layers built over time. This is not just dirt, it is history compacted and fragrant. A faint buzzing sound drifts past your ear. Flies are already awake, tracing lazy circles in the dim light. They settle briefly, then lift again as if unable to decide where the most interesting smell resides. You understand their confusion. Everything here competes for attention. You pause and listen. At first there is nothing. Then slowly a pattern emerges. A soft scratching, irregular but persistent. Not the bold scurry of a rat crossing open ground, but the careful work of claws against wood. You tilt your head, narrowing your focus. The sound comes from behind the left wall, low to the ground. You crouch, pressing your hand lightly against the timber. It vibrates faintly. There is movement inside, perhaps a nest, perhaps a passage. Either way, it is an invitation. A common fact of medieval life slips into your thoughts. Many houses were built with timber frames and filled with materials like wattle and daub which could crack, shift, or wear down over time. These imperfections created perfect entry points for small animals. Once inside, rats could travel through walls, floors, and ceilings with surprising ease, often unseen by the people living just inches away. You reach for your stick and tap gently along the base of the wall. The sound changes as you move from solid to hollow and back again. There, a section that echoes slightly. You mark the spot in your mind and begin to prepare a trap. The dog, ever alert, sniffs along the ground, then scratches at a corner where the wall meets the floor. His enthusiasm confirms your suspicion. This is a busy route. You set the trap carefully, placing the bait just inside the likely path. Your fingers move with practiced precision. Too obvious and the rat will avoid it. Too subtle, and it may miss the trigger entirely. It is a delicate balance, one you have learned through many small failures. As you work, a woman's voice calls from above. You look up to see her, leaning out of a narrow window, her hair wrapped in a cloth, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "Are they there?" she asks. You nod once. She sighs a long, tired sound. They were in the bread last night. You do not ask how much bread. The answer would not change your task. This is the quiet reality of your work. Rats are not just a nuisance. They are thieves taking food from people who already have little to spare. In a world where a poor harvest or a missed delivery can mean hunger, every bite matters. Your traps are not just tools. They are small defenses against a larger uncertainty. You finish setting the trap and stand brushing your hands against your tunic. The woman watches you for a moment longer, then withdraws her window, closing with a soft thud. The passage seems quieter now, though you know that is an illusion. The rats are still there, moving through their hidden corridors, following scents you cannot fully perceive. You are always a step behind, guessing at paths you cannot see. A curious thought crosses your mind, something you once heard from a traveller passing through town. In some places it is said that rats can sense danger before it happens, that they avoid traps, not just through instinct, but through some deeper awareness. Whether this is true or simply a story to explain failure, you cannot say. But you have seen traps left untouched while food nearby is eaten, and it does make you wonder. Historians still question how much of rat behaviour in the medieval period was understood by those who dealt with them daily. Some argue that practical experience led to surprisingly accurate observations, while others believe that much was attributed to superstition rather than careful study. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. After all, you have your own habits and guesses, some proven, some not. You move on, leaving the trap behind to do its work. The dog follows, glancing back once as if reluctant to abandon such a promising spot. But there are many places to check, and the morning is slipping away. The passage opens into a small courtyard where a pile of refuse has gathered near a broken fence. Bits of cloth, vegetable scraps, and what might once have been a shoe lie scattered in a damp heap. The smell here is rich, almost sweet in its decay. You approach cautiously, scanning the edges for movement. This is a place where rats feel safe, where they can feed and hide with minimal disturbance. It is also a place where your presence is most likely to disrupt their routine. You kneel again, setting another trap, your movement slower now as fatigue begins to settle into your muscles. The repetition of the task is both comforting and exhausting. Each placement requires focus, each decision carries weight. As you work, you notice a small hole near the base of the fence. It's just large enough for a rat to slip through its edges, worn smooth by repeated use. You place a second trap nearby, covering both the entrance and the exit. It is a simple strategy, but often effective. The dog sniffs the hole, then steps back as if acknowledging your plan. You stand and take a moment to stretch your back, protesting slightly. The sun has risen further now, casting light into the courtyard and revealing details that were hidden in shadow. The textures of the walls, the patterns in the dirt, the small signs of life that fill every corner. This is your world. Not the grand halls or the busy markets, but the spaces in between. The overlooked, the ignored, the quietly essential. You take a deep breath, then immediately regret it. The smell here is particularly strong, a reminder that your work is as much about endurance as it is about skill. With a small shake of your head, you turn and head back toward the main street, ready to follow the next trail, the next scent, the next faint sound that will guide your steps. The town continues to wake around you, and somewhere just out of sight another rat begins its morning. You emerge from the narrow passage back into a wider street, and the change feels almost luxurious, though luxury here simply means enough space to swing your arms without brushing against damp walls. The market is beginning to stir. Voices rise in uneven bursts, carts creak forward and shutters open with the tired resignation of another working day. This is where your path naturally leads. Food draws people and food draws rats. It is a simple chain as predictable as sunrise. You step into the edge of the marketplace where the ground is already littered with yesterday's traces. Wilted greens, fish scales that catch the light like dull silver, a bruised apple flattened underfoot. The air carries a confusing blend of scents and pleasant most not. You pause near a meat stall that is only just being set up. The butcher's apprentice wipes down a wooden table with a cloth that has clearly seen better days. He glances at you, then at your sack, and gives a small nod. No words are needed, your presence explains itself. You scan the area slowly. Rats here are bold. They have learned that people are noisy, distracted, and often careless. A dropped scrap can become a feast in seconds. You notice a line of gnaw marks along the base of a stall, small but unmistakable. Your fingers brush over the wood. Fresh. You crouch and place a trap just beneath the edge, tucking it where shadows gather. The trick here is subtlety. In a place this busy, anything too obvious will be disturbed before it can do its work. You adjust the bait using a small piece of meat that has already begun to lose its appeal to humans, but remains irresistible to something less picky. A well-known detail about medieval markets comes to mind. These spaces were often central to town life, not only for trade, but for social exchange announcements and even punishment. They were busy, noisy, and rarely clean by modern standards. Waste accumulated quickly, and while some towns attempted to enforce cleanliness through regulations, enforcement varied widely depending on the time and place. You stand and move on, weaving between early shoppers and stallholders. A woman arranges baskets of onions, her hands moving quickly despite the chill. A fishmonger lays out his catch, the smell announcing his presence long before you see him. You pass a baker carrying a tray of fresh loaves, the warm scent briefly cutting through the heavier odours of the street. It's almost pleasant for a moment, then you hear it. A quick scuttle beneath a table, a flicker of movement near a pile of sacks. You turn your head, eyes narrowing, and catch a glimpse of a rat darting between two crates. It disappears as quickly as it appeared, leaving only the memory of motion behind. You follow, keeping your pace steady. There is no point in rushing. Rats are faster, and panic only makes them vanish more effectively. Instead, you observe. The crates are stacked unevenly, creating small gaps and hidden spaces. Perfect shelter. You kneel and peer into the shadows. The ground here is dry but marked with tiny tracks. You reach into your sack and retrieve another trap, setting it with care near the edge of a crate. The dog watches from a short distance, his ears perked, ready to spring if needed. As you work, a voice interrupts you.
Do you ever catch them all?
You look up to see a young man, perhaps a merchant's son, watching with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. You shake your head. No. He frowns, as if this answer disappoints him. Then what is the point? You consider this for a moment. It is a fair question in its way. The point, you say slowly, is that there are fewer tomorrow than there would have been. He nods, though it is clear he is still thinking it over. Perhaps he will understand one day. Perhaps not. A curious belief lingers in your mind, something you once overheard in a tavern. Some people think that rats can bring luck, or that their presence signals hidden wealth or secret passages. It is a comforting idea, turning a problem into a promise. You have never found gold at the end of a rat trail, but you have found plenty of trouble. You finish setting the trap and stand brushing your hands clean. The market is busier now, voices rising and falling like waves. A cart rolls past, its wheels splashing through a shallow puddle. Someone laughs, someone else shouts. Life continues, indifferent to the small battles taking place at ground level. There is still much to do. You move toward a row of stalls selling dried goods where sacks of grain and beans are stacked in neat rows. This is another place where rats thrive. The scent of food is strong, and the containers, though sturdy, are not always secure. You inspect the sacks carefully, looking for signs of damage. A small tear here, a faint trail there. You find both within moments. You press your fingers into the fabric, feeling the shape of the contents within. Grain, valuable and vulnerable. You set another trap nearby, placing it where a rat might approach the damaged sack. Your movements are slower now, more deliberate. The morning's work is beginning to settle into your bones. A nearby stallholder watches you with a wary expression. He does not speak, but his eyes follow your every move. You understand his concern. Your presence is a reminder of a problem he would rather ignore. You finish your task and step back, giving him a small nod. He returns it after a moment, his expression softening slightly. Perhaps he sees the value in what you do, or perhaps he simply hopes you'll move on quickly. Either way, you oblige. As you leave the market, you take one last look over your shoulder. The traps are set, the signs noted, the work begun. It is not a perfect solution, it never is, but it is something. You adjust your sack, feeling its growing weight, and turn toward the next part of town. The streets ahead promise new challenges, new scents, new hidden movements, and somewhere just beyond your sight the rats are already adapting. You leave the busy rhythm of the market behind, stepping into a quieter stretch of the town where the houses press closer together and the sounds soften into something more private. Here the work changes. It is no longer about scraps in the open or bold movements beneath stalls. Now it is about what hides within walls, beneath straw and beside sleeping bodies. A woman meets you at the doorway of a narrow home. She does not smile, but she does not turn you away either, which is its own form of welcome. Her eyes are tired in a way that suggests more than just an early morning. She gestures for you to enter. The air inside is warmer, thick, with the smell of smoke, damp wool and human breath. The room is small, everything is close. A low fire smoulders in the hearth, barely holding its shape. A few rough stools sit near a table scarred by years of use. In one corner a pile of straw serves as bedding, flattened and uneven. You step carefully, aware that every movement here matters. This is not your space. You're a visitor in a place where people eat, sleep, argue and hope for better days. The woman points toward the wall near the bedding. There, she says quietly. You listen. At first there is only the faint crackle of the fire. Then slowly the sound reveals itself. A light scratching followed by a pause, then another. Closer than you would like. You glance at the bedding. A child sleeps there, curled into the straw, unaware of the activity just inches away. You kneel, lowering yourself gently to avoid disturbing anything more than necessary. Your hand presses against the wall. The wood feels thin, too thin. You can almost imagine the space behind it, a narrow passage where rats move freely, hidden but never far. A widely accepted detail about homes of this period comes to mind. Many poorer households shared their living space with animals, stored food nearby, and lacked sealed barriers between rooms and the outside. This closeness made life practical, but it also allowed pests to move easily between human and animal spaces. You reach for your tools, moving with extra care now. This is not a place for sudden noises or careless steps. You set a trap along the base of the wall, placing it where the sound is strongest. The bait is small, just enough to attract attention without overwhelming suspicion. The woman watches you, her hands clasped tightly together. There is a question in her eyes, one she does not voice. You understand it anyway. Will this help? You give a small nod, though. You know the answer is more complicated than that. As you adjust the trap, something brushes against your sleeve. You freeze for a moment, then look down to see a cat weaving past your arm. It glances up at you with mild interest, then continues on its way as if to say that this is all quite normal. Cats are often kept for this very reason, though their effectiveness varies. Some are skilled hunters, quick and patient. Others seem more interested in warmth and food than in chasing anything that might bite back. This one appears undecided. You finish setting the trap and slowly stand, careful not to wake the child. The scratching behind the wall continues, faint but persistent. It will not stop immediately. It rarely does. The woman leads you to another corner of the room where a small chest sits against the wall. She opens it to reveal a few pieces of bread wrapped in cloth. One has been gnawed at the edge, the mark small but unmistakable. You examine it briefly, then nod again. Another trap. Another careful placement. The routine continues, each action guided by experience and a quiet understanding of how these creatures move. As you work, you notice the details of the room more clearly. The worn fabric hanging by the doorway, the uneven floor patched with boards of different sizes, the faint movement of fleas in the straw too small to see directly, but suggested by the occasional twitch of the sleeping child. It is a reminder that rats are only part of the story. They bring with them other problems, smaller and harder to control. Fleas, lice, and the constant irritation of living in close quarters with both animals and other people. There is a curious belief you have heard more than once. Some say that keeping certain herbs in the home can drive away pests that strong scents confuse or repel them. Lavender, mint, even garlic. Whether these methods truly work or simply offer comfort is unclear, but you notice a small bundle of dried plants hanging near the door. Someone here is trying. You finish your work and step back, giving the room a final look. The traps are in place, the signs are noted. It is not perfect, but it is something. The woman thanks you quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She reaches into a small pouch and hands you a few coins. Not many, but enough to show that your effort is valued, even if it cannot be fully repaid. You accept them with a nod, slipping them into your pocket. Payment is never guaranteed in this line of work, and you have learned not to take it for granted. As you turn to leave, the child stirs slightly, then settles again. The scratching behind the wall continues steady and patient. Outside, the air feels cooler, fresher, though the smells of the town quickly return to fill the space. You take a deep breath, letting it out slowly as you step back into the street. There are more houses to visit, more rooms to enter, more hidden spaces to explore. Each one holds its own challenges, its own quiet struggles. You adjust your sack, feeling the weight of your tools and your morning's work, and move on. Somewhere behind you in that small room, a trap waits in silence. And behind the wall, something listens. You leave the cramped homes behind, stepping into a part of town where the buildings rise taller and the air carries a different kind of quiet. Not cleaner exactly, but more controlled. Stone replaces timber in many places here. Walls feel thicker, doors heavier, windows smaller and set higher, as if even the light must ask permission to enter. This is where wealth and devotion try with mixed success to keep disorder at bay. A servant meets you at the gate of a large house, her posture straight but her expression uneasy. She does not want to admit the problem out loud, yet her presence here says everything. You follow her across a courtyard paved with worn stones, your boots echoing softly in a way that feels almost too loud after the muffled streets. Inside, the difference is immediate. The floors are swept. The air smells faintly of herbs and smoke rather than decay. Tapestries hang along the walls, their colours faded but still proud. And yet beneath it all there is a familiar note. A thin, sharp trace of something unwelcome. You know that scent. The servant leads you toward a storage room, pausing at the threshold as if reluctant to go further. You step inside alone. It is cooler here, the light dim, filtered through a narrow opening high above. Barrels line the walls, sacks are stacked in careful rows, order at least on the surface. You kneel beside one of the sacks and run your hand along the fabric. There it is, a small tear barely visible unless you know where to look. Grain spills out in a thin line like sand escaping an hourglass. You press your fingers into it, feeling the shape beneath. Hollow spaces. Movement. A widely accepted point about places like this comes to mind. Even well-built medieval homes, including those of the wealthy, struggle to keep out pests. Stone walls could slow intrusion, but doors, storage areas and supply deliveries created constant opportunities for entry. Food stores in particular were always at risk. You move slowly, inspecting the room. Near the back you find droppings small and dark clustered in a corner where two barrels meet. A path worn into the dust leads from the sacks to a narrow gap at the base of the wall. You tap the stone lightly with your stick. Solid, but the gap is enough. You set a trap along the path, adjusting it with care. Here precision matters even more. The rats that reach these places are cautious. They have survived long enough to learn. As you work, a soft sound echoes from above. You look up, catching a faint rustle in the beams. Not one then, more than one. Of course. You finish placing the trap and step back, considering your next move. The room is quiet again, but you can feel the presence of hidden life tucked into spaces you cannot easily reach. When you step outside, the servant waits, her hands clasped tightly. You give a small nod. They are here, you say. She exhales as if she already knew but needed to hear it confirmed. The master will not be pleased. You almost smile at that. No one is ever pleased. From here, your path takes you toward a nearby monastery. The transition is subtle but distinct. The noise of the town softens, replaced by a kind of ordered stillness. The walls are high, the gates sturdy, and the air carries the faint scent of incense. A brother greets you at the entrance, his expression calm, though his eyes flick briefly to your sack. Even here, the need for your work is understood if not entirely welcomed. He leads you through a cloister where footsteps echo gently against stone. The space feels removed from the rest of the world, as if time moves differently here. And yet beneath the quiet, the same problem persists. You enter a pantry where shelves hold jars, loaves, and carefully stored provisions. The order is impressive, each item placed with intention. But as you move closer, you notice the signs. A gnawed edge, a faint trail, the smallest disruption in an otherwise perfect arrangement. You kneel and inspect the lower shelves. The evidence is subtle but unmistakable. Rats have been here, moving carefully, avoiding notice. A commonly accepted historical detail surfaces in your thoughts. Monasteries often kept detailed records of their supplies and daily routines, which sometimes included mentions of pests and the measures taken to control them. Even in places dedicated to prayer and discipline, the practical challenges of food storage and cleanliness remained constant. You set your traps with the same care as before, placing them where they will do the most good without disturbing the order of the room. The brother watches silently, his hands folded within his sleeves. After a moment he speaks. "We have prayed for relief." You glance up, meeting his gaze, and now you have me. There is no humour in your voice, but the truth of it hangs in the air. He nods slowly, perhaps both are needed. You return to your work, considering his words. In a world like this, where understanding is shaped by belief as much as observation, it is not unusual to see practical effort and spiritual hope side by side. There is an unusual notion you recall hearing, once whispered more than spoken. Some believe that rats were drawn to places of abundance, not just for food but as a sign of imbalance, as if too much prosperity invited its own correction. It is a strange idea, but standing here surrounded by careful order and quiet wealth, you can almost see how such thoughts take root. You finish placing the final trap and stand brushing dust from your hands. The room feels unchanged, yet you know it is not. Small adjustments have been made, small defences set. The brother thanks you with a slight bow. No coins are exchanged here, at least not directly. Your payment will come later, perhaps in the form of food or a favour, or perhaps simply in the knowledge that your work has been accepted. As you leave the monastery, the sounds of the town begin to return. Voices, footsteps, the distant clatter of carts. The world resumes its usual pace, and you step back into it, carrying with you the quiet understanding that no wall, no matter how thick, can fully keep out what thrives in the cracks. You adjust your grip on your tools and continue on, knowing that the next place will be different in its details but familiar in its needs. Somewhere in stone or wood, behind order or chaos, the scratching continues. You step away from the monastery walls and back into the uneven rhythm of the town, where respectability fades quickly into suspicion. People notice you here, not in the quiet, grateful way of the poor household or the restrained acceptance of the monastery, but with sideways glances, wrinkled noses, and the sort of attention usually reserved for things best kept at a distance. Your reputation arrives before you do. A pair of boys linger near a doorway, whispering as you pass. One nudges the other and says something you cannot quite catch, though the laughter that follows makes the meaning clear enough. You hear the word rat more than once, and not in reference to your prey. You keep walking. It is not entirely unfair. You carry the smell of your work. Even when you wash it, lingers tucked into fabric, clinging to your hands. There is no clean separation between you and what you deal with. In a world where scent signals danger, illness, or decay, that matters more than most people will admit aloud. And yet when the scratching begins behind their walls, they will come looking for you. You turn into a busier street where merchants argue over prices and a cart blocks half the way. A man hauling sacks pauses as you approach, stepping aside with a quick glance at your tools. His expression is cautious but not hostile. That is something. Your place in this society is complicated. You are needed but not admired, paid but often reluctantly, welcomed into homes but rarely invited to stay. People speak to you when they must then wash their hands afterward, as if conversation itself might leave a mark. Still, there is a kind of strange respect beneath it all. Not the polished kind given to scholars or priests, but a quieter acknowledgement. You deal with what others avoid. You go where the problem lives. That earns you something, even if it is never spoken clearly. A commonly accepted understanding of medieval urban life drifts into your thoughts. Occupations tied to waste, death, or pests often existed on the edges of social comfort. Workers in these roles could be essential to the functioning of a town, yet still viewed with unease or even mild contempt. It is a balance that never quite settles. You pause near a well where a small group has gathered. A woman draws water, her movements steady and practiced. She glances at you, then quickly looks away. Another man watches more openly, his gaze lingering on your sack. Busy morning, he asks, his tone somewhere between curiosity and caution. "Always you reply." He nods as if this confirms something he already suspected. "Heard they're bad this year." "They're always bad," you say, adjusting the strap on your shoulder. He considers that, then gives a short laugh. Fair enough. Conversations like this are common. Brief, practical, rarely personal. You're a subject, not a companion. A function, not a friend. Still, there are moments when the tone shifts. A woman might thank you more warmly than expected. A child might watch you with fascination rather than fear. Occasionally, someone will ask how you learned your trade, as if there is a secret to it, something that could be passed on like a recipe or a prayer. You never quite know how to answer that. There is no formal training, no guild hall where you are welcomed and instructed. You learned by doing, by watching, by failing and trying again. The knowledge came slowly, shaped by experience and necessity. Some people believe you possess a special understanding, something beyond ordinary skill. You have heard whispers that rat catchers can read signs others miss, that they know how to lure creatures with tricks or quiet words. It is an appealing idea, turning your work into something almost mystical. A curious little detail comes to mind. In later centuries, some pest controllers became known for dramatic displays claiming to charm or control rats in unusual ways, sometimes even performing for crowds. Whether these acts had roots in earlier traditions or were simply clever inventions is not entirely clear, but the image lingers. People like to believe in hidden powers. You continue down the street, passing a group of labourers repairing a section of wall. One of them calls out, "Got any for sale?" You glance over. "For sale?" "Rats," he says with a grin. "Could use a few to scare the new apprentice." The others laugh. You shake your head. You don't want them. He shrugs, worth asking. It is a joke mostly, but it hints at something else. Rats are not just pests. They are symbols used in stories, insults, and warnings. To call someone a rat is to question their character. To speak of rats in a place is to suggest neglect or decay. And you, by extension, become part of that language. There is also the matter of trust. You are allowed into homes, into storerooms, into places where goods are kept and valuables stored. That requires a certain level of confidence, even if it is uneasy. People watch you closely, of course. They count their items before and after your visit. They keep an eye on your hands. You understand, temptation exists in every trade. But you have learned that your reputation, fragile as it is, depends on more than just your ability to catch rats. It depends on being seen as reliable, even if not entirely welcome. A question lingers in your mind, one that does not have a simple answer. Were workers like you ever fully accepted within the communities they served, or did they remain permanent outsiders, valued only for their function? The records that survive do not always agree, and the truth likely shifts from place to place, person to person. You suspect it depends on the day. As you walk, the dog trots beside you, unconcerned with any of this. He does not care about reputation or social standing. He cares about scent movement, the promise of a chase. In some ways, his world is simpler. You reach another corner where a small crowd has gathered around a storyteller. His voice rises above the noise, weaving a tale that draws listeners in. You catch a fragment about a clever animal outwitting a foolish man. The crowd laughs. Stories about animals are common. They make sense of behavior, assign meaning to actions, turn the unpredictable into something familiar. Rats appear in these tales too often as symbols of cunning or survival. You move on, leaving the story behind. Your own work is less entertaining, though no less real. The street narrows again and the smells deepen. You feel the familiar pull of your task guiding you forward. Whatever people think of you, whatever names they use, the need remains. You adjust your grip on your tools and follow it. Because in the end, reputation does not stop the scratching in the walls, and that is where you are needed most. You turn down another lane where the noise fades into something closer to a low murmur, and the work shifts again, this time toward the movement speed and the sharp edge of risk. Here it is not just about placing traps and waiting. Here you rely on living partners, creatures that share your purpose in a way that feels almost like cooperation. The dog at your side is already alert, his body tightening as his nose picks up a fresh trail. His tail stiffens, ears, forward eyes bright with focus. You have seen this posture many times. It means something is close. You follow him toward a low wooden structure, perhaps a storage shed or a rough extension of a house. The door hangs slightly open. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of old straw and something more active, more immediate. You step in quietly. The dog slips ahead, silent now, moving with surprising care. You watch as he pauses, then suddenly lunges toward a pile of bundled reeds. The movement is quick, almost too fast to follow. A burst of sound erupts, scratching, squeaking, the frantic rustle of bodies trying to escape. You move in, blocking one side with your stick guiding rather than striking. The dog snaps, misses, snaps again, then success. He catches one, shaking it once before dropping it at your feet with a proud glance. You nod slightly, a good start. Working with animals like this is not unusual in your line of work. Small, agile dogs have long been valued for their ability to hunt rats, especially in tight or cluttered spaces where traps are less effective. They rely on instinct, speed, and a kind of fearless curiosity that humans can only admire from a safe distance. In some places, ferrets are used as well. Their slender bodies allow them to slip into burrows and hidden passages, flushing out rats that would otherwise remain unreachable. It is a clever method, though not without its challenges. A ferret may chase too far, become lost, or even turn its attention to something else entirely. Control is never absolute. You crouch near the reeds, listening for more movement. There, a faint scuffle deeper inside. You gesture to the dog, who shifts his weight, ready to act. You tap the bundle lightly with your stick, encouraging whatever is inside to move. Another rat darts out, heading for a gap near the wall. The dog is faster this time, intercepting it with a sharp turn. A brief struggle, then stillness. You work quickly, securing both catches and plating them into your sack. The smell intensifies for a moment, then settles into something you're used to. It's not pleasant, but it is familiar. As you stand, you notice a small mark on your hand. A thin red line, barely more than a scratch. You do not remember when it happened. Perhaps during the scuffle. Perhaps earlier. It is easy to overlook such things in the middle of work. You wipe it with a cloth, more out of habit than concern. Still, you are aware of it. Bites and scratches are part of the job, but they carry their own risks. Infection is always a possibility, especially in an environment like this. A widely recognized detail about life in this period comes to mind. Minor injuries could become serious without proper care, and knowledge of infection was limited. People relied on cleaning wounds, applying herbs or using simple remedies, but outcomes varied widely. You flex your fingers, testing the movement. It feels fine, for now. The dog circles the room once more, sniffing for any remaining signs. Finding none, he relaxes slightly, though his attention never fully fades. You give him a brief pat, a small acknowledgement of his work. He accepts it with quiet satisfaction. You step back outside, letting the fresher air clear your head. The sun is higher now, casting stronger light across the street. Shadows shorten, details sharpen. The town feels more awake, more aware. As you move on, you pass a man leading a ferret on a thin cord. He nods to you, a gesture of shared understanding. Not quite a colleague, but close enough. You glance at the animal, its sleek body moving with restless energy. There is a certain respect among those who work with creatures like this. It is not formal, not spoken, but it exists. You recognize the challenges, the unpredictability, the small victories. A curious idea lingers in your thoughts. Some people believe that animals used in pest control develop a kind of special bond with their handlers, an understanding that goes beyond simple training. Whether this is true or simply a way of describing familiarity is hard to say, but you do notice how your dog responds to your movements, your voice, your presence. He knows your rhythm, you know his. As you continue, you notice a group gathered near a doorway, their voices low and concerned. You catch a few words, bite fever not healing. You do not stop, but the conversation stays with you. There is always a risk in what you do, not just from the animals themselves, but from what they carry. You have heard stories, some more reliable than others, about illness following contact, about fevers that come without warning. Some accounts suggest that those who work closely with vermin face higher chances of sickness, while others argue that exposure might in some cases build a kind of resistance. The truth is not clear and likely varies from person to person. You glance again at your hand. The scratch is small, already beginning to dry. You decide not to worry. There is work to be done and worry rarely helps. The street opens into another cluster of buildings, each with its own hidden corners and quiet problems. You feel the familiar pull of your task guiding you forward. The dog moves ahead, nose low, ready for the next sign. You follow your tools steady in your grip, your senses tuned to the smallest hint of movement. Because in this work it's not just about what you see, it's about what you sense, what you anticipate, what you learn to expect before it happens. And somewhere just out of sight another pair of small eyes watches, waiting for its moment to move. You leave the shed behind and follow the slow bend of the street toward a row of workshops where the smell shifts again, this time toward leather metal and damp wood. Work is well underway here. Hammers ring in steady rhythm and voices carry with a sharper edge. This part of town measures time in labour, not bells. Your own labour has its rhythm too, though it pays far less predictably. You pause near a cooper's yard where barrels are stacked in uneven towers. A man with thick arms and a permanently furrowed brow watches you approach. He does not greet you. He simply waits as if you are another problem to be priced and possibly argued with. You nod. You sent for someone. He grunts. There are in the back, chewed through 2 staves this week. That catches your attention. Barrels are not easy targets. If rats are gnawing wood that thick, it means food is close and hunger is sharper than usual. You follow him behind the yard where broken pieces lie scattered. The damage is clear. Curved planks show deep marks, edges splintered and worn. You run your hand over one of them, feeling the grooves left by teeth that never stop growing. A widely accepted fact comes to mind. Rats must gnaw constantly to keep their teeth from growing too long. This natural need drives much of their destructive behaviour, turning even solid materials into targets over time. You crouch, studying the ground. Tracks overlap in a messy pattern. This is not a single visitor. This is a route, perhaps even a nesting area nearby. Busy spot, you say. The cooper crosses his arms. Busy means expensive. You glance up at him. There it is, the real question. You consider your answer carefully. Payment is always a negotiation, never fixed, never guaranteed. Some pay in coins, others offer food, old clothes, or promises that may or may not be kept. Depends how much you want done, you reply. He snorts. I want them gone. You almost smile. Everyone wants that. I can reduce them, you say. Set traps, clear what I catch. But they come back if the place feeds them. He looks around as if seeing his own yard for the first time. Scraps of wood, bits of grain from nearby storage, damp corners where water collects. It is not ideal. How much, he asks again. You name a price, not high, not low, just enough to make the work worth your time. He frowns, calculating, then nods once. Half now, half when I see results. It's not perfect, but it's fair enough. He hands you a few coins, their edges worn smooth. You feel their weight in your palm before slipping them into your pocket. Payment always feels slightly unreal until it's in your hand. You get to work. Traps are placed along the edges of the yard near the damaged barrels beside the darker corners where movement is most likely. You use stronger bait this time, something with a richer scent. If the rats here are bold enough to chew through wood, they will not be easily tempted by crumbs. As you work, the cooper watches closely. Not out of distrust exactly, but out of concern. This is his livelihood. Every damaged barrel is lost effort, lost time. A curious detail surfaces in your thoughts. In some places, bounties were offered for dead rats, encouraging people to bring in proof of their catches in exchange for small payments. It was an attempt to control numbers, though its effectiveness likely varied. Still, it shows how seriously the problem was taken. You finish setting the traps and stand stretching your back. The Cooper steps closer, examining your work as if he might learn something from it. That all he asks. For now, you say, give it time. He nods, though impatience lingers in his expression. Time is not something tradesmen like to waste. You leave the yard and continue down the street, your thoughts turning to the nature of your earnings. It is never steady. Some days bring more work than you can handle. Others pass with little more than a few small jobs in the hope of better luck tomorrow. You pass a woman selling vegetables from a basket. She calls out to you, offering a handful of wilted greens at a reduced price. You pause, considering. Food is food even when it has seen better days. You trade a small coin for the bundle, tucking it into your sack. It is not much, but it will do. A question drifts through your mind, one that has no easy answer. How did people in your position manage their livelihoods over time, balancing irregular work with daily needs? Some records suggest a patchwork of trades with individuals taking on multiple roles to survive. Others hint at more specialized work in larger towns. The reality likely shifts with circumstance. You chew thoughtfully on a piece of the greens as you walk, their taste slightly bitter, but welcome enough. Hunger sharpens appreciation. The street begins to thin, the noise fading as you move toward a quieter area. The buildings here are older, their surfaces worn smooth by years of weather and use. It feels like a place where things settle, where change comes slowly. You stop near a low wall, listening. The familiar sounds are there, faint but steady. Another job waiting. You reach into your sack, fingers brushing against the remaining traps, the cloth bag, the small pouch of herbs. Each item carries its own purpose, its own place in your routine. You think again of the coins in your pocket, half now, half later. A promise tied to results you cannot fully control. That is the nature of your work. Effort does not always guarantee reward. Success is measured in small increments, in fewer sounds behind walls, in less damage to goods. You crouch and begin to set another trap, your movement steady despite the growing weight in your limbs. The day is far from over. And somewhere behind you in the Cooper's yard, the first trap waits in silence, ready to decide whether your payment will be complete. You rise from the low wall and continue on, the faint bitterness of your simple meal still lingering on your tongue. The day has settled into a steady rhythm now. But the deeper you move into your work, the more you begin to feel the other layer beneath it. Not just the rats themselves, but the constant shadow of sickness that follows close behind. It is not something people like to speak about directly. Illness arrives quietly, often without warning, and once it settles in, it can change everything. You've seen enough to know that your work touches this hidden world, even if no one fully understands how. You turn into a street where the air feels heavier, less from smell and more from something harder to name. A group stands outside a house, their voices low, their posture tense. You slow your pace slightly, catching fragments of conversation. Words like fever swelling and weakness drift toward you. You do not stop, but you listen. In this time, people explain illness in ways that make sense within their world. A widely accepted idea is that bad air, what many call miasma, carries disease. Foul smells are not just unpleasant, they are dangerous. Places like Midden, stagnant water and crowded rooms are seen as sources of harm, their odours warning of unseen threats. You glance around, noticing how the street fits this pattern. Narrow, damp, filled with lingering scents that never quite fade. It is easy to see why such beliefs take hold. Your own work places you directly in these spaces. You breathe the same air, touch the same surfaces, move through the same corners where illness is thought to begin. It is not a comforting thought. You reach a doorway where a man waits, his expression drawn tight. He gestures for you to come closer. "They're in the cellar," he says. "Heard them all night." You nod and follow him inside. The descent into the cellar is slow, each step creaking under your weight. The air grows cooler, thicker, with a dampness that settles into your clothes. At the bottom, the light is dim, barely enough to see by. You pause, letting your eyes adjust. The smell here is different from the streets above. Earthy, enclosed with a hint of mould. It is the kind of place where things linger, where moisture collects and time feels slower. You hear it almost immediately. Movement among the stored items. A soft rustle, then a quick scurry. You move toward the sound, your steps careful on the uneven floor. Cellars like this are common in many homes, used to store food tools and anything that needs to be kept cool. They are useful, but they also create perfect conditions for rats. Dark, quiet, and filled with potential food sources. You kneel near a stack of jars, noticing a small trail of disturbed dust leading behind them. You shift one slightly, revealing a narrow gap. The sound grows clearer. You reach for your trap, setting it with practiced precision. The bait is placed just inside the path where it will draw attention without raising alarm. Your fingers move steadily, though you are aware of the closeness of everything here. The walls, the ceiling, the air itself. As you work, you think of the remedies people turn to when illness strikes. Herbs, poultices, prayers, and careful diets. Some are based on observation, others on tradition. A mixture of knowledge and belief that has grown over generations. There is a small bundle hanging from a beam above you tied with string. You recognize the scent as something like rosemary or sage. These plants are often used in the hope of cleansing the air, of pushing back whatever unseen force might be present. Whether they truly help is uncertain, but they offer comfort. And in a world where so much is uncertain, comfort has its own value. You finish setting the trap and stand brushing your hands against your tunic. The man waits at the top of the stairs, his silhouette outlined by the light above. "Will it help?" he asks. You give the same answer you have given many times. "It will make a difference." He nods, though his eyes search your face for something more definite. You cannot give it to him. As you climb back up, the air feels lighter, though the weight of the place remains with you. You step outside, taking a slow breath. A peculiar belief comes to mind, one you heard from a traveller long ago. Some people think that certain illnesses are carried not just by air, but by tiny creatures too small to see moving from place to place. It is an idea that does not fit neatly with common understanding, yet it lingers difficult to dismiss entirely. There is no agreement on such matters. Some hold firmly to the idea of corrupted air, while others suggest more complex causes. The truth, as far as anyone can tell, remains out of reach. You glance at your hands, at the faint marks and stains that never fully fade. You wonder briefly what they carry. The street around you continues as it always does. People move, trade, talk, live their lives. The presence of illness does not stop the rhythm, it only weaves itself into it. You adjust your sack, feeling the familiar weight, and move on. Your work does not cure disease, it does not promise safety, but it touches the edges of something larger, something that shapes the lives of everyone in this town. You follow the next faint sound, the next subtle sign, aware that each small action is part of a much broader struggle. And somewhere in the spaces between walls and beneath floors, the quiet movement continues. You follow the sound into a street that feels different before anyone says why. The town is awake now, fully and uneasily awake, with carts rolling shutters open and voices passing from window to window. Yet beneath the usual noise there is a thinner note, a kind of nervous brightness in the air. People are talking more quietly than usual, but more urgently too. Rumour has arrived. It moves faster than any rat. It slips through doorways, over market stalls, across wells, into church porches, and under every roof where fear is already waiting for somewhere to sit. You hear pieces of it as you walk. A fever near the quay, a family shut inside their house, a traveller dead before sunset, a swelling under the arm. No one says plague at first. They circle it as people circle dangerous animals, hoping not to wake the thing by naming it. But the word is there, pressed behind their teeth. You slow near the market cross where a cluster of people has gathered round a man who claims to have come from the road east. His cloak is dusty, his face serious, and that is enough to make him important for the next few minutes. He speaks of sickness in another town, of bells ringing too often, of carts carrying bodies at night. Some listeners cross themselves, others ask questions of one another. A woman pulls her child closer, as if closeness alone can make a wall. You stand at the edge, not quite part of the crowd. People glance at you, at your sack, at the dog beside your leg. Their eyes move quickly away. In times like this, anything associated with filth becomes suspicious. You can feel the thought forming around you. Rats in the lanes. Bad air in the alleys. You with your traps and your smells and your work in hidden corners. Comforting company, obviously. A solid piece of history rests beneath this fear. The Black Death reached Europe in the mid-14th century and killed a huge portion of the population in many regions, reshaping families' labour, religion and daily life for generations. People living through it did not know the modern science of plague, but they knew the terror of sudden sickness and fast death. You do not live in a textbook, though. You live inside the rumour before it becomes a date. You live in the morning when people are still unsure whether the danger is near or only imagined. That uncertainty may be the worst part. The church bell begins to ring, not for a funeral, not yet, but for prayer. The sound rolls over the rooftops slow and heavy. People turn toward it almost instinctively. If medicine cannot promise certainty, prayer offers shape. A place to put fear, a rhythm to breathe by. You continue walking. The next call comes from a house near the quay where the streets slope toward the water, and the smell of river mud mingles with fish rope tar and damp timber. Trade feeds the town, and trade also brings whatever the road and river carry. Grain will wine, news flees sickness. The world is generous that way. A porter waves you toward a warehouse, his face pale with worry. They've been in the sacks, he says, all night. You enter the building where stacked goods rise in dim rows. The air is cool and stale. A shaft of light falls through a high opening, catching dust in a drifting beam. The dog lowers his nose immediately. Here the rats are not just household thieves. They are passengers of commerce moving along with goods, ships, carts, and stored food. Whether anyone in your time fully grasps the chain does not matter in the moment. You see the pattern. Rats gather where goods gather. You inspect a torn sack near the back wall. Grain spills across the floor in a pale fan. Tiny tracks cross it, many tracks over the lapping. You kneel, setting a trap near the root between the sack and a dark gap under a pallet. Another trap goes near a barrel where droppings collect in a narrow line. The porter watches from several steps away as if distance from you might help. Can they bring sickness? He asks. You pause. It is not the first time you have heard the question, though it is rarely asked so directly. They bring filth, you say carefully. Filth brings trouble, is the truest answer available to you. People in your world often connect disease with foul places, corrupted air, divine displeasure, unlucky stars, or contact with the sick. Some of these ideas will miss the mark. Others will circle near part of the truth without landing fully. There is no simple map. One strange little belief whispered in fearful times says that rats abandon a doomed place before disaster arrives. Sailors sometimes tell versions of it, swearing that vermin fleeing a ship means danger is coming. Maybe rats simply leave when food, water, or shelter changes. Maybe people remember the moments that make a good story and forget the many times rats ran about for no grand reason at all. Still, when fear is thick, even a fleeing rat becomes a prophet with whiskers. The dog stiffens. You follow his gaze toward a stack of crates. A rat appears for half a second, dark against the dust, then vanishes behind wood. The porter flinches as if it had crossed his own foot. You move the crates one at a time, slowly giving the dog room. The scent strengthens. Beneath the lowest crate you find a nest of shredded fibres, straw and bits of cloth. Warm, recent. You clear it carefully with your stick, avoiding direct contact. The dog sniffs and sneezes. Outside voices rise again in the street. The rumour is still moving. By evening it will have grown legs, wings, and perhaps horns. Someone will add a detail. Someone else will remember a dream. A third person will blame strangers. Merchants, sinners, the poor, the rich, the weather, the moon. Fear is rarely short of imagination. Researchers disagree about how ordinary townspeople connected rats to plague before modern germ theory. Some evidence suggests people noticed links between vermin, filth, and sickness in broad practical ways. Other evidence shows that explanations often centered on air, divine judgment, astrology, or moral disorder. You, standing in the warehouse dust, do not have the luxury of resolving it. You have traps to place. You finish your work and stand your knees stiff. The porter promises payment after the owner returns, which is the kind of phrase that has buried many honest coins in the graveyard of hope. You accept it with a nod because arguing now would only waste breath. When you step back outside, the town seems both ordinary and altered. Bread is still being sold, water is still being carried. A child still chases another child through the lane until a woman snaps at them to stop. Life continues, but it keeps glancing over its shoulder. You pass the church where more people have gathered. Candles flicker inside small points of light against the dimness. The smell of wax and incense drifts out cleaner than the street, but still touched by human worry. You pause for only a moment, then the dog pulls gently ahead. There is another alley, another wall, another hidden movement. Rumour may swell, bells may ring, but rats do not wait for certainty. They keep eating, they keep nesting, they keep passing through the town's secret veins. So you follow one careful step after another into the uneasy afternoon. The uneasy afternoon thins slowly into evening, and the town begins to change its face. Daylight does not vanish all at once. It loosens its grip by degrees, slipping from roof tiles, draining out of alleys, leaving the corners to gather themselves into darkness. You feel the change before you fully see it. Sounds sharpen, smells deepen. The ordinary world leans closer. This is when the night work begins. You stop beside a low wall and check your lantern. The horn panes are scratched and cloudy, but they still hold the little flame safely enough. A good lantern is a comfort, though not a strong one. It does not defeat darkness. It merely negotiates with it, offering a small circle of trembling gold in exchange for your courage. The dog stays close now. Even he seems more thoughtful after sunset, less eager to rush ahead. His ears twitch at every sound. A loose shutter knocks gently against wood. Somewhere a cartwheel creaks. Farther off, a drunk sings half a song and forgets the rest. Beneath it all, quieter than speech but steadier than rumour, the rats begin their proper hours. You move toward a granary near the back of a merchant's property. The owner's servant has been waiting, arms folded, foot tapping, trying to look annoyed instead of afraid. He leads you through a yard where shadows pool between barrels. The smell of stored grain reaches you before the door opens, dry and warm and faintly sweet. Inside, the darkness feels crowded. You raise the lantern. The light spreads across wooden beams, stacked sacks, hanging ropes, dust and the soft golden slope of spilled barley near one wall. It should be a peaceful sight, almost homely. Instead, every shadow seems to hold its breath. Night makes rats bold, fewer boots, fewer voices, fewer sudden human interruptions. Their world expands while yours shrinks to whatever the lantern can touch. In many medieval towns, grain storage was one of the most protected and anxious parts of daily life. Harvests had to last. Prices could rise quickly, and spoiled or stolen stores could mean real hardship. Vermin in grain was not a small inconvenience. It was a threat to food, profit, and survival. You kneel beside the spilled barley and study it carefully. Tiny tracks cross the dust. Some are fresh, the edges still crisp. A line of droppings marks a route along the wall, then disappears behind a stack of sacks. You listen. Scratch. Pause. Scratch again. There is something intimate about hearing a creature you cannot see. It makes the walls feel thin. It reminds you that human spaces are never fully human. You set the lantern down and take out a trap. The dog sniffs along the baseboard, then freezes. You place the trap where his nose lingers, using a small bit of bait and a pinch of grain. The mechanism clicks softly as you prepare it. That sound always feels too loud at night. The servant waits in the doorway, unwilling to come farther in. "Will you stay?" he asks. For a while you say. He swallows. "I heard them above the rafters." You look up. The Sims vanish into gloom. Of course they are above the rafters. Rats enjoy vertical travel, almost as much as they enjoy ruining a person's peace. You lift the lantern higher and catch a flicker of movement gone before you can follow it. A strange old belief comes to mind, one that sometimes circulates among householders and stable hands. Some say rats hold councils at night gathering, in hidden places to decide where to feed next. It is a ridiculous thought, probably born from hearing many bodies move at once in the dark. Still, when you stand under a roof that whispers in every corner, the idea feels less ridiculous than it should. You cross the room, slowly placing another trap near a beam where claw marks streak the wood. The dog gives a low whine, not fear exactly, but excitement held tightly in his chest. You touch his head once to steady him. Then the first trap snaps. The servant gasps from the doorway. You turn sharply, lantern, swinging light rushing over sacks and floorboards. The dog darts towards the sound. You follow, heart quickening despite yourself. The trap has done its work. You secure the catch with practice movements and place it into the sack. One small victory. In daylight you might barely pause over it. At night it feels larger, almost dramatic, like the darkness itself has given up a secret. You reset the trap. The servant mutters a prayer. You do not tease him. Night work makes believers of nearly everyone. There is an ongoing question among historians about how often pest control happened after dark rather than during daylight hours. Written records do not always tell us the practical schedule of workers like you, but experience suggests that night offered both danger and opportunity. Rats were more active. Households were quieter and careful listening became easier. It also meant poor light tired bodies and a much greater chance of imagining things. And you do imagine things. A rope becomes a tail. A shadow becomes a crouched body. A falling grain kernel sounds like a footstep. You tell yourself to remain calm, but your senses keep sharpening, trimming away every unnecessary thought until only the room remains. The lantern flame flickers. You hear another rustle, this time overhead. Dust drifts down from a beam. The dog barks once sudden and sharp. You lift your stick just as something darts along the wall, too fast for the trap, too fast for the dog, too fast for your tired eyes. It vanishes into a gap nearer the floor. You stare at the gap for a long moment. Big one, the servant whispers. Fast one, you answer. Both are true enough. You place another trap near the gap, angling it carefully. Then you sit on an overturned crate and wait. Waiting is part of the work people do not see. They imagine you charging about, heroic in a very dirty way, conquering vermin with skill and nerve. Sometimes there is action, yes, but often there is waiting, listening, breathing quietly, letting the place settle around you until hidden life resumes its patterns. The granary creaks as the air cools. Outside the yard is nearly silent. The town beyond it murmurs in low tones softened by distance. Your eyelids grow heavy, but your ears remain awake. You think back to the morning, to the market, the poor room, the monastery pantry, the rumours near the quay. Different walls, same scratching, different people, same wish. Please make the hidden thing go away. Another trap snaps. You rise slower this time and the dog follows. The night is doing its work and so are you. By the time you leave the granary, the moon has climbed above the roofs, pale and watchful. Your sack is heavier. Your hands are cold. The servant thanks you with the seriousness of a man who will sleep a little easier, even if only for tonight. You step back into the lane lantern, swinging at your side. The town is dark now, but not asleep. And as you walk toward the next storehouse, every faint scratch seems to invite you onward. You leave the granary with the lantern still glowing faintly at your side, and the town seems to stretch wider in the dark, as if the spaces between buildings have grown. The streets are quieter now, but not empty. A few figures move through the night wrapped in cloaks, their footsteps quick and purposeful. No one lingers long without reason. Your path draws you toward another place where quiet matters more than comfort. The storehouses near the edge of town where grain beans and dried goods are kept in larger quantities. Here the stakes feel higher. Not just a household meal, but supplies meant to last through seasons. You approach a long wooden structure set slightly apart from the others. Its door is secured with a simple latch, but the wood around it shows wear. You run your hand along the surface, feeling grooves and faint cracks. Not enough to break through easily, but enough to invite attention from persistent teeth. Inside the air is still. No servant waits this time. No watchful eyes, just you, your dog, and the quiet promise of movement. You lift the lantern again. The light reveals rows of sacks stacked higher than a man's shoulders, their shapes forming narrow corridors between them. It feels almost like a maze, one built from food and necessity. You step inside, carefully aware that your presence shifts the balance of this space. A practical reality of medieval life settles into your thoughts. Grain storage was essential to survival, especially through winter months. Losses from pests could mean not just inconvenience, but real hunger. Protecting these stores was a constant concern even when methods were limited. You move deeper into the rows, your boots making soft sounds against the packed earth. The dog stays close, his nose low, tracing invisible lines. You pause near a corner where the sacks meet a wooden beam. There it is, a steady rustling, not hurried, not panicked, comfortable. You crouch, setting the lantern down so the light falls just enough to reveal the ground. Tracks again, more than before. This is not a passing route, this is a feeding ground. You reach for your traps, placing them with extra care. One near the base of the beam, another along a narrow path between sacks. You use grain as bait this time, blending it into what is already there. Less suspicious. As you work, you notice something else. A small gap beneath the lowest row of sacks, just wide enough for movement. You shift one slightly, revealing a hollow beneath. A nest. Straw cloth bits of fibre all pulled together into a rough shape. It is warm to the touch, recently used. The dog stiffens, then lets out a low-gree growl. You tap the edge of the nest with your stick. Chaos follows. Several rats burst out at once. Their movement a sudden explosion in the stillness. They scatter in different directions, some darting past your legs, others disappearing into the maze of sacks. The dog leaps forward, catching one mid-run. You block another with your stick, guiding it toward a trap. The moment is brief but intense, then it is over. You stand still, listening for any remaining movement. The space settles again, though the silence now feels thinner stretched. You secure what you can and reset your traps, your hands moving more quickly now. The discovery of a nest changes everything. It means this place has been active for longer than anyone realized. A curious notion crosses your mind, something you once heard from a traveling merchant. He claimed that rats could remember safe paths and teach them to others passing along. Knowledge of where food and shelter could be found. Whether this is true or simply a way of explaining their persistence, you cannot say. But watching how they move, how they return, it is easy to believe they learn from experience. You finish your work and stand stretching your back slowly. The lantern light flickers across the sacks, casting long shadows that shift with every movement. It's a strange kind of quiet one that feels temporary. As you prepare to leave, you take one last look at the nest. Empty now, but not abandoned. They will return, they always do. You step outside, the cooler air brushing against your face. The night feels deeper now, the moon higher. The streets quieter still. Your sack is heavier, your step slower. There is a question that lingers in your thoughts, one that has no clear answer. How much of this work truly reduces the problem and how much simply keeps it from growing worse? The balance is hard to measure, especially in a world where records are sparse and outcomes are uncertain. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. You adjust your grip on the lantern and begin to walk again, the dog moving at your side. There are more places to check, more hidden spaces to explore. The town may sleep, but your work does not. And somewhere behind those stacked sacks, in the dark spaces between necessity and neglect, the quiet movement begins again. You leave the storehouse behind and follow the slope of the land downward where the town begins to lean toward water. You can smell it before you see it. Not the clean scent of a clear stream, but something heavier, slower, carrying the memory of everything that has been thrown, washed or forgotten upstream. The river is a lifeline, but it is also a collector. You walk along the bank where the ground turns soft beneath your boots. Reeds whisper in the faint breeze. A broken cartwheel lies half sunk in mud, abandoned to time and damp. The lantern light trembles over the surface of the water, catching bits of debris that drift lazily past. This edge of town is never truly clean. Waste flows here, not always by design but by habit. Buckets emptied, scraps discarded, runoff from streets and workshops. It gathers, settles, moves on, and with it life follows. You crouch near a low stone embankment and listen. The sounds are different here, less contained. A splash, a rustle in the reeds, the faint scrape of something moving along the bank. Rats thrive in places like this where food and shelter meet without interruption. Across medieval towns, rivers and drainage channels often served multiple purposes at once. They provided water for daily use routes for trade and unfortunately convenient places to dispose of waste. The result was a constant tension between necessity and contamination. You move along the edge, scanning for signs. There, near a cluster of reeds, you see a small opening in the mud. A burrow. The edges are worn smooth, the path leading to it marked by repeated use. The dog notices it too. He lowers his head, sniffing carefully, then looks up at you with that familiar alertness. You set the lantern down and prepare a trap, placing it just outside the entrance. This is a riskier approach. Rats using burrows can be quick to retreat, vanishing into tunnels you cannot follow. But if timed right, it can be effective. You wait. The water laps gently against the bank. Somewhere in the distance, a nightbird calls. The town feels far away, reduced to a soft murmur behind you. Then movement. A rat emerges cautiously, its body low, its whiskers testing the air. It pauses, sensing something different. You hold your breath, every muscle still. A step forward, the trap snaps. The sound echoes slightly over the water, louder than you expect. The dog lunges, and you move quickly to secure the catch. The mud shifts under your feet, and for a moment you feel yourself slipping, but you steady yourself just in time. You exhale slowly, the tension easing. Working near water always carries its own challenges. The ground is unstable, the air damp, the risks less predictable. But it is also necessary. Rats here can travel along the banks, moving between parts of town with ease. You reset the trap and continue along the edge, checking other likely spots. Another burrow, this one partially collapsed. A cluster of debris caught against a fallen branch. Each place offers a possibility. As you work, you recall an unusual idea you once heard from a fisherman. He claimed that rats near the river were different, stronger somehow, better swimmers, more cunning. Whether this is true or simply a reflection of their environment is uncertain, but you have seen them move through water with surprising confidence. You pause near a narrow channel where water trickles away from the main river, forming a shallow ditch that runs back toward the town. This is another pathway, less obvious, but just as important. You follow it for a short distance, noting the signs along its edges. Dropping, tracks, a faint worn trail through the grass. You place another trap here, angling it carefully to catch anything moving between the ditch and the bank. Your hands move more slowly now, fatigue settling into your fingers. The night deepens. A question lingers in your thoughts as you stand and stretch your back. To what extent did people in towns like this understand the role of waterways in spreading problems like pests and illness? Some evidence suggests they recognized the dangers of stagnant or foul water, while other aspects remained unclear or misunderstood. You look out over the river, its surface dark and reflective. It carries so much visible and invisible, known and unknown. You pick up your lantern and turn back toward the town. The path rises slightly, leading you away from the damp edge and back into the maze of streets and buildings. Behind you, the water continues its slow journey. Ahead, the town waits, filled with its own hidden movements. You walk on your steps steady, despite the growing weight in your limbs. The dog follows his pace, matching yours, his senses still sharp. There is no clear boundary between one part of your work and the next. It flows like the river from one place to another, carrying with it the same challenges, the same quiet persistence. And somewhere along the hat path, another faint sound reaches your ears. A scrape, a pause, a sign that the work is not yet done. You leave the damp hush of the riverbank and climb back into the tighter weave of the town where the lanes narrow and the walls seem to lean in as if listening. Night has settled properly now. Doors are shut, shutters pulled tight, and whatever light escapes does so in thin slices that barely touch the ground. This is when rules matter more, not because they are always followed, but because they are noticed. You turn a corner and nearly walk into a man carrying a lantern of his own, its glow brighter and steadier than yours. He wears a short cloak and a badge pinned at the shoulder. An official, not high-ranking but enough to ask questions. He stops, raising his light towards your face, then lowering it to your sack. "Working late," he says. "Always, you rally." He nods slowly, as if confirming something already expected. "Mind where you set your traps. Last week someone complained of a snapped finger." You glance at your hands. "I place them carefully." "I'm sure you do," he says, though his tone suggests that certainty is a luxury he does not share. "This is the other side of your work. Not just the catching, but the managing of where and how it happens. Towns often have rules about cleanliness, about waste, about the placement of hazards. Whether those rules are enforced consistently is another matter, but they exist written or spoken, shaping the edges of daily life. In many medieval towns, officials known as wardens or watchmen were tasked with keeping order, especially at night. They checked for fires, disturbances, and anything that might threaten the safety of the community. You fall into that category in a way, not a threat, but not entirely separate from one either. The man steps aside, letting you pass. Just don't leave anything where a child might find it, he adds. You nod and continue on. It's a fair concern. Your traps are not selective. They do not know the difference between rat and hand, between pest and curiosity. You have learned to place them where only the intended target is likely to reach, but nothing is perfect. You move toward a small square where a few lanterns hang from hooks, their light pooling weakly on the ground. A group of men sits nearby, talking in low voices. They glance up as you approach, their expressions unreadable in the dim light. One of them speaks. You catch many tonight. A few, you say. He leans back, considering. City should pay you more. You almost laugh. The city pays when it must, and even then not generously. There are fines for leaving waste in the street, another man adds, gesturing vaguely toward the shadows. But no one enforces them unless it piles too high. He is not wrong. Regulations exist, often written down with careful wording, but their enforcement depends on time, place, and the willingness of those in charge. Some towns are stricter, others more lenient. In many cases, people adapt to the rules rather than fully obeying them. You think of the middens, the drains, the scattered refuse you have seen throughout the day, each one a small failure of order or perhaps simply a reflection of how difficult order is to maintain. You nod to the group and move on. As you walk, you notice a narrow alley branching off to your left. It is darker than the others, its entrance partially blocked by a stack of broken boards. You hesitate for a moment, then step toward it. The smell hits you first, strong, concentrated, layered. This is a place where things are left and forgotten. You lift your lantern, the light pushing back just enough darkness to reveal the ground. Waste has gathered here in a low heap, damp and uneven. Perfect. You set your sack down and begin to prepare your traps. This is the kind of spot where multiple placements can make a difference. You choose your positions carefully near the edges where movement is most likely. As you work, you recall an unusual detail you once heard from a travelling clerk. In some towns, people were required to clean the area in front of their homes regularly, with fines for those who failed to do so. The idea was simple, but the results were mixed. Some complied, others ignored it, and the overall effect depended heavily on enforcement. You finish setting the traps and stand taking a step back to view your work. The alley remains quiet, but you can feel the potential within it, the hidden activity that will return once you leave. There is a question that lingers in your mind. How much control do these rules truly offer, and how much do they simply give the appearance of control? The answer is not clear and likely changes from one place to another. You pick up your sack and turn back toward the main street. The lantern light flickers as you walk, casting shifting shadows that stretch and shrink with each step. The town feels different at this hour. Less crowded, more honest in a way. What is hidden during the day becomes more apparent, if only for those willing to look. You pass the official again, now further down the street, speaking with another figure. He glances at you briefly, then returns to his conversation. You continue on your path, guided by habit and instinct. There are still places to check, still signs to follow. The rules of the town shape your work, but they do not define it. The rats do not read regulations. They do not respect boundaries. They move where they find opportunity. And so do you. You adjust your grip on the lantern and follow the next faint sound deeper into the night. You move deeper into the night, leaving behind the watchman's lantern and the murmur of enforced order. Here in the older part of town, the buildings seem to hold on to darkness more tightly. The walls are uneven, patched over generations, and the air feels still, as if it has settled into place and decided not to move again. This is where belief lingers, not the structured belief of the monastery with its prayers and measured rituals, but the quieter, more personal kind, the kind that lives in corners, in whispered warnings, in small objects tucked above doorways or hidden beneath floorboards. You pause outside a house where a bundle hangs from a nail near the entrance. twigs tied together with string mixed with bits of cloth and something that looks like dried flowers. It sways slightly as you pass, catching the lantern light. You have seen many like it. Inside, the air carries a faint herbal scent stronger than usual. Someone here has taken care to place it. You step in at the invitation of an older woman, her face lined not just with age, but with long familiarity with worry. "They come at night," she says, her voice low, "always at night." You nod. That's when they prefer to move. She glances toward the ceiling. "I've hung what I can, burned what I was told to burn, still they come." You follow her gaze. More bundles hang from the beams. Small charms, bits of plant, even a carved piece of wood shaped into something you cannot quite name. Protection in its many forms. You kneel near the wall listening. The scratching is there, faint but steady as it has been in so many places before. You begin to set your trap, your movements slow and deliberate. A commonly recognized aspect of daily life in this period is the blending of practical action with protective customs. People used herbs, charms, and spoken words not only for comfort, but as part of their approach to dealing with unseen threats. These practices were not always separate from more practical efforts. They existed side by side. As you place the trap, the woman watches closely. "Do they fear the smoke?" she asks, gesturing toward a small dish where something has been burned recently. "Sometimes strong scents make them cautious," you say, "but not for long." She nods as if confirming something she already suspected. "They are stubborn." That they are. You finish setting the trap and stand brushing your hands against your tunic. The room feels quieter now, though the change is subtle. The woman reaches into a small pouch and hands you a coin, then hesitates, adding a small bundle of dried leaves. "For you," she says, "in case it helps." You accept it with a slight nod. Whether it helps or not is not the point. It is an offering, a gesture of shared uncertainty. As you leave, you notice another mark near the doorway. A small symbol drawn in chalk, faded but still visible. Protection again in another form. You step back into the street, the lantern casting a soft glow ahead of you. The town feels different here, quieter, more inward. Each house holds its own small defences, its own way of pushing back against what cannot be fully controlled. You walk on, passing another doorway where a charm hangs, then another where a sprig of something green is tucked into a crack. Patterns repeat, but never exactly the same. A curious thought surfaces. Some people believe that certain animals, including rats, can sense these protections, that they avoid places marked in particular ways. Whether this is true or simply a reflection of human hope is difficult to say. You've seen rats in houses filled with herbs, and you have seen houses left untouched for reasons no one can explain. There is no single answer. You turn into another narrow lane, your steps slower now as fatigue settles more deeply into your limbs. The day's work stretches behind you long and varied, yet the pattern remains consistent. Sign sounds placement waiting. You stop near a low doorway where a faint noise reaches your ears. You listen, focusing on the rhythm. Not scratching this time, but a soft, repetitive gnawing. You crouch, setting your lantern down and prepare another trap. Your hands move almost automatically now, guided by habit and experience. As you work, a question lingers in your mind. How much of what people believe about these creatures shapes their response, and how much comes from observation alone? The line between the two is not always clear. You set the trap and stand stretching your back with a quiet sigh. The night is deep now, the town mostly still. Only a few lights remain scattered like distant stars. You pick up your lantern and continue on, the dog following close behind. The charms, the herbs, the symbols, they all speak to the same desire. To understand, to control, to protect. Your work fits into that pattern, though it takes a different form, less symbolic, more direct, yet no less uncertain. You adjust your grip on the lantern and move toward the next sound, the next sign, the next place where belief and reality meet in the dark. And somewhere just beyond the reach of your light, something small and persistent continues its quiet work. You turn from the narrow lane and follow a quieter stretch where the houses sit a little farther apart, their outlines softer in the moonlight. The night has settled fully now. Even the restless voices have thinned, leaving only the occasional footstep or distant murmur to remind you that the town is still awake in places. Your body feels heavier with each step. The work has been long and the small strains of the day have begun to gather into something more noticeable. Your shoulders ache, your fingers feel stiff, even your breathing carries a faint weight. You pause beneath a low archway, setting your lantern down for a moment to rest your hand. That is when you notice it again, the scratch on your skin. It is no longer just a faint line. The edges look slightly raised now, the skin around it a little darker. You turn your hand in the lantern light, studying it more closely than before. It is still small, nothing dramatic, but it is no longer something you can ignore completely. You have seen wounds like this before. Some heal without trouble, others do not. The difference is not always clear at first. You reach into your pouch and pull out a small strip of cloth. Wrapping it carefully around your hand, you tighten it just enough to cover the mark. It is a simple measure, but it gives you a sense of control. In this time, even minor injuries carry uncertainty. There is no clear line between safe and dangerous. A scratch can remain just that, or it can become something more serious over the course of days. People rely on cleaning, binding, and whatever remedies are available, but the outcomes are never guaranteed. You flex your fingers again. The movement is slightly uncomfortable now, but still manageable. Not today, you murmur quietly, more to yourself than anything else. The dog glances up at you as if aware that something has changed, then returns his attention to the ground. His world remains focused on scent and movement. Yours has shifted slightly, just enough to remind you of your own limits. You pick up the lantern and continue on. The next house sits at the edge of a small open space, its door ajar, a faint light flickering inside. You approach cautiously, then knock lightly against the frame. A man answers, his face drawn, his eyes shadowed by worry. He steps aside without a word, allowing you to enter. Inside, the air feels thick, not with smell this time, but with tension. A woman sits near the hearth, her hands wrapped tightly around each other. A child lies nearby, restless, shifting in uneasy sleep. You glance toward the walls. There it is again, the faint sound, scratching steady and familiar. You move toward it, setting your lantern down as you prepare your trap. Your movements are slower now, more deliberate. The ache in your hand makes itself known with each adjustment. The man watches you closely. Can they bite through skin, he asks suddenly. You pause for a moment. Yes, you say. He nods, his expression tightening. And then what? You consider your answer carefully. There are many possibilities, none of them comforting. Sometimes nothing you say, sometimes it becomes sore, sometimes worse. He exhales slowly as if bracing himself for something he cannot yet see. You finish setting the trap and stand wiping your hands against your tunic. The room remains tense, the air heavy with unspoken concerns. A practical observation comes to mind. Wounds from animals, especially those living in unsanitary conditions, could lead to infection. Without a clear understanding of bacteria, people relied on visible signs like redness, swelling, or heat to judge whether a wound was becoming dangerous. You glance again at your own hand, hidden now beneath the cloth. The woman speaks softly. We heard of someone who took ill after a bite. You nod. It can happen. She looks down at the child, then back at you. Will your traps help? They will help with the rats, you say gently. It's not the answer she wants, but it's the only honest one. As you gather your things, you notice a small bowl near the hearth filled with a mixture of herbs. The scent is sharp, almost medicinal. Someone has been trying to treat something or perhaps prevent it. There is a long history of using plants and natural substances to care for wounds. Some may have mild benefits, others offer little more than hope. In the absence of certainty, people use what they have. You nod to the man and woman, then step back into the night. The air feels cooler now, brushing against your face, clearing your thoughts slightly. You walk slowly, your pace measured, your attention divided between the path ahead and the quiet discomfort in your hand. There is a question that lingers, one you do not often allow yourself to consider. How many of those who work in trades like yours suffer consequences that are never fully recorded, never clearly understood? The answer is likely more than anyone knows. You tighten the cloth around your hand slightly, then relax it again. No use cutting off circulation in the name of caution. The dog moves ahead, pausing to sniff at the base of a wall, then looking back to you as if to say there is more work to be done. Of course there is. You take a slow breath and follow. Because the night does not pause for discomfort, and neither can you. You press on though. Your hand now carries a quiet pulse that keeps time with your steps. The cloth around it has warmed, holding the heat of your skin, and every now and then you feel a faint sting that reminds you it is there. Not enough to stop you, not yet, but enough to stay in your thoughts like a word you cannot quite forget. The town has grown colder as the night deepens. A thin chill settles into the stones and rises through your boots. Your breath becomes visible in the lantern light drifting away in pale threads. Winter is not fully here, but it is close enough to announce itself. And with it comes another challenge. Food grows scarcer. You turn into a street where the houses are smaller, their doors worn and patched. The windows are shuttered tightly, not just against the cold, but against the loss of warmth that cannot easily be replaced. Inside, people will be gathered close, sharing heat, sharing space, sharing whatever food they have managed to keep. Rats understand this as well as any person. They move toward warmth, toward shelter, toward the smallest crumb that might sustain them. In colder months, the struggle between people and vermin becomes more intense. Both seek the same limited resources, often in the same confined spaces. It is not a matter of preference, it is necessity. You approach a low house where faint light leaks through a crack in the shutter. The door opens before you knock as if they've been waiting for you. A thin man stands there, his shoulders hunched against the cold. He nods quickly, stepping aside. Inside the room is crowded, not with objects but with presence. 2 children sit near the hearth, wrapped in rough blankets. A woman stirs something in a pot, the smell faint but comforting, and beneath it all the now familiar sound. You set your lantern down and move toward the source, your steps careful. The floor creaks slightly and one of the children looks up, watching you with wide eyes. Not afraid exactly, curious. You kneel near the wall, listening. The scratching is closer than usual, almost urgent. You can hear multiple movements overlapping, restless. You begin to set your traps, placing them with extra care. In a space like this, every placement matters more. There is less room for error, less space to correct mistakes. As you work, you notice how close everything is. The food, the bedding, the people. It is a reminder of how tightly life is packed here, how little separates one need from another. A commonly accepted reality of the time comes to mind. During colder seasons, both humans and animals often shared closer quarters either by necessity or design. This increased warmth, but also brought greater exposure to pests and the problems they carried. You finish placing the first trap and move to set another, near a small gap in the floorboards. The wood here is worn, the edges softened by years of use. It is an easy entry point. The woman glances over. "They've been worse since the cold came," she says quietly. You nod. They come in for warmth. She stirs the pot again, her movements slow. "We have little to spare." You understand every loss here is felt more sharply. You finish your work and stand stretching carefully. Your hand protests slightly, the movement pulling at the wrapped skin. You ignore it. The man steps closer, holding out a small piece of bread. "We have no coin," he says. You take it without hesitation. Payment comes in many forms, and this one feels honest. As you turn to leave, one of the children speaks. "Do they feel the cold too?" You pause, considering the question. "Yes," you say, "but not the same way we do." No. The child nods, as if this answers more than you intended. Outside, the air feels sharper now. The cold has deepened, settling into the bones of the town. You pull your cloak tighter, adjusting your grip on the lantern. A curious thought drifts through your mind. Some people believe that harsh winters reduce the number of rats, that the cold drives them away or diminishes their strength. Others have observed that they simply move closer to human spaces, becoming less visible but no less present. The truth likely shifts with conditions, with food, with shelter. You continue walking, your steps slower now, more deliberate. The night stretches on and your body feels each hour more clearly. The dog remains steady, though even he moves with less urgency now, his energy tempered by the long day. You pass another house, then another, each holding its own quiet struggles. The sounds are softer here, muffled by the walls and distance, but they're still there. The scratching, the movement, the constant presence of something just out of sight. You stop for a moment, leaning lightly against a wall, letting the weight of the day settle. This is the part no one sees. Not the setting of traps, not the catching, but the endurance. The steady continuation even when the body asks for rest. You straighten again, taking a slow breath. There is still work to do. The town does not pause for fatigue, and neither can you. You lift the lantern and step forward, following the faintest hint of sound into the cold night. You keep moving. Though each step now feels like it carries the full weight of the day behind it. The town has quieted to a near whisper. Even the restless voices have faded, replaced by the occasional distant cough, a shifting shutter, or the soft clatter of something settling where it was left. This is the hour when the town breathes slowly. Your lantern burns lower, the flame smaller now, its glow softer and more fragile. You shield it with your hand for a moment, coaxing it to hold. It steadies, but only just, like you. The street ahead leads toward a broader road, one that connects different parts of the town. By day it would be busy with carts and trade. Now it lies open and still, the stones pale under moonlight. You pause in the middle of it just for a moment. It is rare, this kind of stillness. You can almost hear the town thinking. Behind the walls, people sleep or try to. Some rest peacefully. Others lie awake, listening for sounds they hope not to hear. A scratch, a movement, a sign that something unwelcome shares their space. You know those sounds well. You start walking again slower now, not searching quite as sharply as before. The work has changed. It is no longer about covering as much ground as possible. It is about finishing what you can, leaving the rest for tomorrow. A steady truth of medieval life settles into your thoughts. Towns were living systems, always in motion, always adjusting. No single effort could solve every problem. Instead, people worked in cycles, addressing what they could, then returning again and again as new challenges appeared. Your work fits into that rhythm. You're not the end of the problem, you're part of its management. You pass by the cooper's yard again. The traps you set earlier sit quietly in place, their shapes barely visible in the dim light. You crouch to check one. Empty. You move to the next. Not empty. You handle it with care, your movements slower than before, your hand still wrapped but steady enough. The small success feels quieter now, less sharp than earlier in the day. Perhaps you are simply too tired to feel it fully. You reset the trap and stand your back, protesting more noticeably this time. The long hours have settled into your muscles, making each motion slightly heavier than the last. The dog watches you, his expression calm. He seems to understand that the pace has changed, that the urgency has softened into something more measured. You leave the yard and continue on your path, now guided less by sound and more by habit. You know where the trouble tends to gather. You know which corners to check, which walls to listen to. As you walk, a strange little story comes to mind. Some say that in certain towns, people believed rats carried messages between worlds, slipping through cracks not just in walls but in reality itself. It is an odd thought, but in the quiet of the night, with the town half asleep and half dreaming, it feels almost possible. You shake your head slightly, letting the idea pass. Fatigue makes room for such thoughts. You reach a small square where a single lantern still burns near a doorway. Its light spills onto the ground, creating a small island of warmth in the surrounding dark. You step into it, letting the glow touch your face. For a moment, you simply stand there. No movement, no sound, just light. There is a question that drifts through your mind, one that has likely been asked in many forms over time. How much difference does one person's work make in a place as complex as this? The answer is not simple. It is not measured in single moments or single actions. It is measured over time, in fewer sounds behind walls, in less damage to food, in nights that pass with a little more quiet. You take a slow breath and step back into the dark. The lantern feels lighter in your hand now, though you know that is not truly the case. It is your perception shifting, your body adjusting to the rhythm of the night. You follow one last sound, faint and distant, leading you toward a narrow gap between two buildings. You pause there, listening carefully. Nothing, or perhaps something too soft to catch. You consider setting another trap, then decide against it. Not here, not tonight. You straighten your decision made. The work will continue tomorrow. You turn away from the gap and begin to make your way back through the streets, your steps slow but steady. The town remains quiet, its hidden movements continuing without you. And for the first time since before dawn, you allow yourself to stop searching. You walk back through the sleeping town, your lantern, now little more than a soft glow that keeps the darkness from closing in completely. The streets feel different on the return, not empty but settled, as if everything that needed to happen today has already happened, and what remains belongs to tomorrow. Your steps are slower now, not searching, not listening as sharply, just moving. The dog stays close, quieter than before, his earlier energy worn down into a steady companionship. Even he seems ready for rest. You pass familiar places, the market now silent, its stalls dark and stripped of the day's noise. The poor houses where faint light still flickers behind shutters. The monastery walls tall and still, holding their quiet like a secret. Each place carries the memory of your work, though nothing looks different from the outside. That is the nature of it. You have spent the entire day in motion, setting traps, following sound, stepping into spaces most people avoid. Yet the town appears unchanged. No banners raised, no announcements made, just a quiet shift beneath the surface. A grounded truth about life in places like this settles in your thoughts. Many essential tasks were invisible in their results. Clean water carried waste removed, pests controlled. These efforts rarely drew attention unless they stopped. Their success was measured in absence rather than presence. You reach a narrow street where the stones feel more familiar under your boots. This is closer to where you rest, where your tools are kept, where the day can finally end. Your hand aches more noticeably now. The cloth has loosened slightly and you pause to adjust it, tightening the wrap just enough to keep it in place. The skin beneath feels warm, perhaps more than before, though it is hard to tell in the cool night air. You consider it for a moment, then let the thought pass. It will need care, yes, but not here, not in the middle of the street. You continue on. A faint memory surfaces, something you once heard from an older worker who had spent years in a trade not so different from yours. He said that the body keeps count of every small strain, every unnoticed injury, every long day. Not all at once, but over time. A quiet tally that reveals itself slowly. You understand that now. You reach your door, a simple wooden panel set into a wall that has seen many seasons. You push it open and step inside, closing it gently behind you. The space is small, but it is yours. A place where the sounds are familiar, where the air does not carry the weight of the entire town. You set your lantern down, watching the flame flicker one last time before you lower it further. The room dims, shadows stretching into the corners. Your sack rests heavily against the wall. You will deal with it in the morning, not now. You sit slowly, feeling the strain ease from your legs as you lower yourself. The dog settles nearby, curling into a shape that suggests he will not move again for some time. For a moment you simply breathe. The day replays itself in fragments. The market, the narrow passages, the scratching behind walls, the cold air by the river, the quiet fear in people's voices. Each piece fits into the whole, forming a pattern that is both familiar and endless. There is no final victory in this work. No moment where the problem is solved and stays that way. Instead, there is continuity, a cycle that repeats, shifts, adapts. You reach for a small bowl of water and a cloth, carefully unwrapping your hand. The skin beneath is slightly swollen now, the mark more defined. You clean it as best you can, the cool water offering a small relief. Then you wrap it again, more securely this time. A curious question lingers in your mind as you finish. How many people across towns like this lived with similar small uncertainties, carrying on through daily work without knowing what each injury or exposure might bring? It is not something often written down, but it is part of the reality nonetheless. You lean back slightly, letting your shoulders rest against the wall. Outside, the town continues its quiet breathing. Somewhere a rat moves along a beam. Somewhere else a trap waits in silence. Somewhere a person sleeps more easily because of what you have done. And somewhere the work is already beginning again. Your eyes grow heavier. The room feels warmer. Now the edges softer, the details less sharp. The long day finally loosens its hold, allowing you to drift. The lantern fades to a low glow. The sounds of the town slip further away. Your breathing slows. And as you settle into rest, the world you have moved through all day begins to quiet, not entirely but enough. The scratching, the movement, the constant presence of small unseen lives. It all softens. You let it go. Slowly, gently. until there is only stillness. Word count 1130. Now the pace softens even further. The night deepens around you, wrapping the town in a calm that feels almost protective. The worries of the day fade into the background, their edges blurred by distance and rest. The streets you walked, the doors you passed, the sounds you followed, they all settle into memory, no longer urgent, no longer demanding. Your breathing becomes steady even. The small room holds its warmth quiet and contained. Outside the air remains cool, but here within these walls there is a sense of pause, a gentle pause where nothing more is required of you. The work is done for now, not finished, never finished, but complete enough to allow rest. You feel the weight of your body against the floor, the support beneath you, the stillness around you. Each part of you begins to relax, releasing the tension carried through the long hours. The hand you wrapped rests quietly, no longer the focus of your thoughts. It simply exists, part of you healing in its own time. The dog beside you shifts slightly, then settles again, his breathing slow and calm. Beyond your door, the town continues in its own rhythm, but it feels distant now, softened by the quiet of the night. The faintest sounds drift through, barely noticeable, like echoes from another place. You do not need to follow them anymore. You do not need to listen for every movement, every sign. You can simply rest. Rest. The darkness is no longer something to push back against. It becomes a gentle presence, a space where your thoughts can slow and soften. You let your mind drift, the images of the day dissolving into something lighter, less defined. The narrow streets, the lantern light, the quiet work, they all blend together into a calm, steady rhythm. Nothing sharp, nothing urgent, just the slow passage from wakefulness into rest. And as you settle deeper, the town fades further until it is only a distant memory, a place that will still be there when morning comes. For now there is only this quiet moment, this stillness, this rest. Sweet dream. Seems